gonna cue in a couple seconds here.
Sweet.
Loading, loading, loading. Okay, give me 1 second. Just gonna double check, make sure we are live on Facebook. Yes, okay. We are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sassquad Trail Runners Facebook Live interview series for our 7th episode of 2021. My name is Kim Levinsky. I'm the owner and race director for Sassquad Trail Runners in New Jersey. Tonight, we are joined by Hilary Hillygoat Allen. She is to my right, not sure how it looks on your screen. So before we give Hilary her squatchy introduction, I'm going to share just a few quick updates for you on what's happening in the world of Sasquatch trail running. If you're not familiar with who we are a trail running community in New Jersey. We put on events. We like to call them trail parties all around the state. And we love to have a welcoming atmosphere where runners and hikers of all ages and paces can join our events. So real quick, here's the rundown for you. Our next trail party is this Saturday, just in a couple days. It's over at the South Mountain Reservation, West Orange, New Jersey, for a brand new event in our series called the Squatch Apple Trail Race. We have an 11-mile, 20-mile, 33, and 50-miler. After the Squatch Apple, we are headed up north to Stoke State Forest in Branchville, New Jersey. That's in Sussex County. That is on May 1st for the Thunder Chicken Squatch. I can't say that name without laughing. Quick backstory on it, because I love telling the story. I've probably told it 100 times. If you didn't know, May is National Military Appreciation Month, and we're going to be celebrating that at the Thunder Chicken Squatch by offering 50% off to all military and veterans. So the name Thunder Chicken comes from one of our most recent interviews 2 times ago with active duty soldier Samantha DeRozier. She was one of our former runners. She's since been stationed out west in the U.S. Army. She shared during that interview a hilarious story about how she got her Army call sign name Thunder Chicken. And so we thought it was only fitting to name our May race after Samantha's call sign in honor of Military Appreciation Month. Later in June, the last Sunday of the month, we are hosting the Midnight Squatchapalooza at the Burlington County Fairgrounds in Columbus, New Jersey. We just got final approval for that event. We got the permit today, so that is officially on. We've opened up registration where you can sign up, and if you had previously pre-registered to secure your spot, we sent you an email today for you to accept that invite, and then your credit card will be charged. So that's on Ultra Sign Up. And for that race, it starts at midnight, just like the name says. You can run for 12 hours, you can run for 6 hours, you can run a 5K that starts at midnight. Or if you're not into the overnight thing, you can catch us in the morning at 9 a.m. to run a 3-hour option. So that's about it for our races that are coming up. We have some events in the summer. You can learn more about that on our website, which is sasquadtrailrunning.com. Okay, here is the reason you are all here. Hilary Allen, Hillygoat. So first things first, I told Hilary this, we need to give a huge shout out to our mutual friend, Elise Mordos, who made the connection for us. If you've been listening to our podcast series, you've watched our interviews, you'll remember that we had Elise on the series last summer it was, and she came on with Trisha Ignatowski and Olivia O'Neill, and they chatted with us about their group, the Trail Women BK, which stands for Brooklyn. Well, since then, the 3 of them have pretty much ditched us. They've moved west. They are relocating to Colorado, and that is where Elise connected with Hilary. And Hilary reached out to me and said, hey, I think you guys should connect. You're both good people. Do you want me to make the connection? And I actually had to read the email twice because I couldn't believe she was offering to connect me with Hilary Allen. And I jumped all over it. I was super excited. We've been sharing it in our community. You guys are excited. I know that you're on here ready for a great night. So I'm going to read Hilary's bio just to set the stage, give you a little background. Most of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with who Hilary is, but just in case you're not, I'm going to fill you in and paint the picture for you. So here is Hilary's Bio. In 2017, world-class ultra runner Hillygoat Allen was at the top of her sport, and it felt like she was running on top of the world as she competed in Norway's Skyrace. Allen was nearly halfway through the 50K when she fell 150 feet off an exposed ridge, fracturing her back and breaking multiple ribs, both feet, and both of her lower arms. 10 days and 2 surgeries later, Hilary flew home and underwent 3 more surgeries in Colorado. She was told that she might not ever run again. Just 11 months after her injury, after a rehab period that tested her determination, courage, and spirit, Hilary placed second at the Broken Arrow Vertical Kilometer race in Lake Tahoe, and then raced a 52-kilometer race the next day. And to top that off, a week later, she won a mountain race. So Hilary hopes to inspire, educate, and encourage other people to find balance in their lives, something the injury has helped her find. She studies and teaches science using her master's degree in neuroscience and physiology and structural biology. She is a trail running coach with CTS, a gravel cyclist, and the host of the Train Right podcast. And I do want Hilary to take a second to share her sponsors, because I want them to get a good shout out before we jump into this.
Is that where I'm coming? Oh man,
that's your cue right there.
Hey, I'm super excited. Thank you so much for being on here. And again, huge shout out to Elise for the introduction. I'm super excited to meet with you guys virtually. Hopefully I can make it over there in person sometime soon. But yeah, so my sponsors, hopefully I don't forget any of them. North Face, I've been with them since the beginning of this trail running journey. Jaybird, so they're for the earbuds. Scratch Labs, they keep me fed, so I'm not super hungry and hangry. Swiftwick Socks is one of the earliest sponsors I had. And the cycling side of things, there's Julbo for eyeglasses, I like eyewear, and Saris. Yeah, and of course, running watches, Cora. So there's a lot of them.
There it is. I wanted you to do that because I didn't want to miss any either. So I put you on the spot a little bit. But I also didn't mention in the intro that Hilary just released her book, which is right here, Out and Back. Yeah. So you can now get that on Amazon. I encourage you to do it right now. I know you got the Amazon Prime membership. Just hop on there and you can order it. I read it in a day and a half. It was phenomenal.
And the cool part too is there's also an audiobook available, and I actually got to record the audiobook. So there's a sufficient amount of emotion in the words, I think.
Awesome. Well, Hilary, thank you so much for coming on our interview and our podcast.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, it's a I can't do in-person events yet, but this is a close second. So I'm very appreciative.
Awesome. Well, I have a whole list. I told you before we started this live, I've got a page and a half of notes that I took during the book. Everything is highlighted in here. I know we're going to run out of time, and I promised you who are listening and watching, I will share and I will ask your questions. So throughout the chat, if you want to go in the live chat, you can drop a comment and I'm going to keep an eye on that. I can pass those questions on to Hilary throughout the night. So Hilary, my first question for you, well, first of all, is the tables are turned a little bit tonight because you're usually the host of your podcast, right?
Yes, this is true. I know. I'm used to being the interviewer.
So we're shifting it around a little bit. My first question is, what is the number one question that people tend to ask you? There must be a question that's usually repeated. What would that be?
I'm assuming in reference to kind of the accident, and well, I think there's two actually, and it happened today earlier when I was out getting groceries. I'm wearing shorts today, and because it's getting nicer here in Colorado, and I have these pretty big scars on my legs. It looked like a big bear kind of like attacked me. Insert whatever, mountain lion, bear, whatever you want. And so usually it's children who have enough of curiosity or courage to like look at my scars and like ask like what happened or like point and stare. But today it was the checkout man. At Whole Foods, he's like, what happened to your leg? And so like I went into the whole, so depending on what mood I'm in, I can, tell the story. So thankfully I had the book coming out. So I just gave him my card. I was like, you want to learn more? Here you go. Yes. But so it's that, just because the scars can be quite obvious. And I think the other one is more of a complicated question, but generally it's like, how did you approach recovery? So it's just kind of like looking for either tips if someone is there, just, you know, in their own recovery or, you know, struggling through that, just kind of like, how did you do it?
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So with your book, let's give people who are listening just a quick overview of it. Like when you're describing it to people, what is your book about? And I'm curious, when did you decide to write the book? Those are my two.
Yeah. So actually just today I published a blog post on why I chose writing. For me, writing has been something that's incredibly cathartic. It's a way for me to just be raw and real, and I can write whatever I'm feeling down on the page and there's no judgment. Like I'm the only one that has to read it. It's safely secured within these, you know, the confines of my notebook. But as soon as you share this publicly with people, I think it can create a space for others to join you in your experience. And so the reason why I decided to write the book and what I think the book is about, it's less of a recovery story. It's more of an invitation for others to learn that challenges are not these impossible things or these walls that are insurmountable. They're actually an opportunity to learn and to grow and to become stronger. And I would like my book to be that invitation for others to question what they think is impossible and to learn, you know, what strength that they possess. And I think writing is incredible because it creates this community, this space where with me sharing my vulnerability through my experiences, I think someone reading that can insert their own experiences. And, you know, you don't have to fall on 150 feet off of a cliff to relate to struggle and setback. Right. That's the beautiful thing about, you know, human experience. It's shared even in the smallest, you know, emotions. And, you know, just we share suffering, basically. It brings us together. We all experience the same emotions, and you know, we just all have different experiences which can create the same things. And so, yeah, like I said, I decided to write it. Actually, kind of what got the ball rolling, I had pitched the idea to this publishing company, Blue Star Press. They're a small company based out of Bend, Oregon, and husband and wife run. Like, I fell in love with them. They're awesome. Brenna, the woman who she's a runner. Peter's an enthusiast. But I pitched it to them in September of 2018. So, you know, after I had kind of made my little quote unquote comeback to running, and then I didn't actually start writing it until the winter of 2019 when I broke my ankle. So
yes,
I had, you know, ample time and more frustration. And actually it was kind of more of a, I think an opportunity for me to re-experience some of that raw emotion that I experienced during, you know, the accident recovery, which, you know, was still super fresh, but yeah, it was just another way for me to heal and through the writing process. And so, yeah, 2019 is kind of the year that I took to write the book.
And that, when you broke your ankle, that was when you referenced that in the book, right? Was that was the break? Okay.
Yep. So that was, you know, the 18 months post accident, finally getting momentum, and then I break my ankle.
I know. When I was reading it, I said no. I said it out loud. I was like, no.
Yeah.
Well, like I told you before this started, and I want to give another plug for the book. I really felt like you were right there telling me your story. You did such a great job, just documenting the whole process from start to finish. And the thing I think I appreciated the most, and I'm sure you're going to get this a lot from other people, is just how honest you were in your writing. You didn't sugarcoat anything. You really didn't leave out a lot of details. And I think, like you said, that's going to allow, you know, people who are reading to really relate to what you shared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was honestly, for me, I joke with people that know me well, is that I'm a very genuine person. And so what you see is what you get. So I'm a very optimistic person. So like genuinely happy. However, when I'm experiencing like sorrow or anger, you also get that very genuinely as well. And so it was a very, so it was just also a pact that I made for myself, is that I wanted to be honest. And if I lied or sugarcoated anything, I was only hurting myself. I was only, filtering my experience. And so I made that decision from the very beginning that I wanted to be honest. And I was so sick of the typical athlete comeback story where they go silent and, do all this work and go through all of this horrible stuff, but they suppress it from themselves and the world. And then all of a sudden they're back on the stage. And it seems like, oh, like now I'm back. Here I am again.
Right.
And for me, I wanted to be honest with the process. And in so I created this incredible community, I think, or just room for community. So yeah.
How was that process of writing? Was it challenging?
Yeah.
It sounds like it was almost, in a way, it was kind of coping and therapeutic. What was that like for you to write it all out?
Yeah, so it definitely was. I think for me, it was a way of kind of, experiencing it again and writing in real time and processing kind of what I went through and what I learned. But there were so many days that I sat down to write and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I'm not a professional writer. Like, what the heck am I supposed to say? Like, I don't have any wisdom. I'm trying to figure this out. Like, I didn't feel like I had this like digestible point. I didn't even know what it was. And so what helped me, honestly, was movement. So I kind of got in this routine. I chose to still compete and race while I was writing it and train. And so what I would do is I had this routine where I would get up in the morning and I would read an excerpt or kind of jot down a few notes. And then I'd go out for my training run or ride that day. And I'd bring my phone with me. And I think everyone has experienced this. Like, you kind of get this clarity of thought or even this burst of creativity. And so I brought my phone with me and I could record little voice memos. And so, I mean, if you've read the book, so there's a lot of little stories in there. And so I kind of organized the book on themes. And so I would like, oh, this would be a really cool story. And I could relate it to this theme. And so I'd write these little voice memos down. And then once I got back from my run, I would be like eating and then like, I'd have all this energy to write. And that's just, that's kind of how I did it. I actually, I was in France for a big time of it. Spoiler alert. I actually I went back to Tromsø, Norway, the site of the big accident 2 years later. And that's during the time that I was writing. So that's included in the book too. So
that was awesome. I'm glad you mentioned that just a minute ago about that the book is kind of organized with themes. And that's definitely the way that I interpret it as well. And I shared this with you. I think my biggest takeaway, and I was so impacted by all that you shared about the power of community. I would love to chat about that. If you're familiar with Sassquad, you know that we love building community and just getting invested in each other's lives. So Hilary, would you want to talk about the power of community and, your whole process of what that looked like and how it's transformed who you are?
Yeah. And first of all, I think your community starts with such a strong name. Like, holy crap, like all of the names of the races, I'm like, I just want to do it just because of that. Like, but no, so honestly, and I think a lot of us can relate to this. I would describe myself as like a lone wolf. I am an introvert. I can thrive in big groups. I'm very outgoing. However, I like to recharge by myself. And I use my time running almost as therapy. Like, it's like active meditation. I don't usually run in a ton of big groups, but like when I do, it's like there's this sense of community. But so the weird thing that I discovered about myself through the injury process was how much of a community that I actually had. And I think it looks different for everyone. Not, everyone, you don't have, some people are extroverts and they thrive on group settings. But for me, I discovered that my community can just be 2 or 3 people who, I can be honest and raw with. Or it can be like a whole community of trail runners. And I actually felt that simultaneously throughout my injury recovery. I discovered, who truly mattered to me, who I could be raw and honest with, express these raw feelings, during my recovery, where I had wished that the accident would have killed me because it felt easier. And I was dealing with depression, and I was, super sad, and lost my identity, sense of self. And, I only had a few people that I could actually be that raw and honest with.
Right.
And, that's what my, I think, immediate community looked like. They saw me day in and day out. They saw me when I had tears, like, rolling down my face, and I had no energy to do anything, or no, motivation. I didn't see the purpose. But they were there, and they showed up for me. My PT, Matt Smith, he's one of those people. And, my mother,
Right.
and, a few close friends here in Boulder. But then extending to the greater community, I just realized kind of, and I write about it in this blog that I just wrote, but I think through writing and through sharing your experiences and vulnerability, it creates space for a community to join in with you. And so not only was it, every runner or athlete, injuries are kind of a part of the process. And so, I was astounded by the number of people that would reach out to me and say, hey, like, I'm struggling with this, and you're inspiring me to keep going, or hang in there. I also had a Liz Franck injury. It's like a ligament tear. And, I got through it, and here's what I did. And so it was just that. And then, people that I didn't even know, just, showing up for me, and, doing nice things, or sending me a nice message. And then it encouraged me to do more of the same. And I think that was kind of more of the positive momentum to continue writing and sharing my vulnerability and honesty, because I felt like I was making some sort of a positive difference in the world. And that's, again, why I wrote the book. I feel like it's a gift. And if I could even help just a few people, I think it would be worth it. But I think it's creating that kind of global community.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And I think maybe, I hope it's helpful too for maybe somebody who's out there who doesn't have that community yet, that they can just see, like, wow, this is possible to get plugged in,
Yeah.
I loved when you were talking about the gym where Matt was at. I like want to go and be a member of that gym.
Dude, they are the best. I love these guys. They're awesome. And also, just like with that too, I mean, for me, like I said, I've always thought I was a lone wolf, and I was like, oh, I don't need anyone. Like, I'm just like different, or I'm, I just need to be by myself. But like, I think what's so cool is, even if I go to these, I have a bunch of acquaintances, and I go to like a big group trail run, I've met some of my closest friends that way. So it's, even if you go to this big community event, it can seem overwhelming. Like, even if you just meet one person, and that can become your community in a way, it doesn't have to be big. It just has to be meaningful to you. Yeah. And that's what I love about the trail running community. It's so awesome, because it's like like-minded people, and you're bound to, it's like a numbers game. You're bound to run into someone that's
yes.
for you.
One of our previous, Thunder Chicken. So Thunder Chicken described she described trail races as, it's really just a bunch of vagabonds and hippies that show up. Nobody knows each other for the most part, and yet you're totally embraced and supported, and it's really a transformative experience.
Yeah, I love it. And also, like, like the name Sasquatch, just like, he's just a lone wolf, but like, everyone loves him because they're looking for him. He's out there.
It.
They all want to be his friend.
Exactly. That's awesome. So Power Community was, I loved, that was a reoccurring theme in the entire book. Also loved just how, I think, vulnerable and honest you were about your mental health. And you talked a lot about your struggle with depression through the entire process. Would you mind chatting about that a little bit? And, what did that look like when you were going through recovery? What kind of, what things helped you get through that? Maybe that could be helpful for somebody listening.
Yeah. And so again, this is through my history, just as a person before I found running. I've always had a variety of interests. And so I never thought that, something, having something, one of my hobbies kind of taken away from me would hit me so hard. Because I was a scientist. I mean, honestly, I studied neuroscience. So, you know, I've always been aware of mental health, and I think it's synonymous with physical health, but I think it's easier as athletes to focus on the physical health because it does bring about certain things. Like I could explain the science of a running high. But you know, it has to do with rapid eye movement, like REM sleep. So it's like you're scanning back and forth, up and down on the trail. And so like running is a really good way to kind of get that rush of endorphins and to feel that, you know, kind of relief for that, you know, just, yeah, that typical runner's high. So that could feel like you're taking care of yourself, and it can feel, I've used it as like active meditation. But so when I had that, you know, taken, you know, basically taken away from me, I felt this huge loss of identity. I felt this huge loss of self. And I think that's the first time in my life that I have had experienced that. And this is again what I'm saying, that I don't think you have to have fallen off a cliff to relate to that. A move, you know, can do this. You know, trying to get plugged in with the community, feeling isolated, the pandemic. I mean, it's enough to cause this kind of this shift to your universe. You know, going through a breakup, a divorce, a job change, like any of these things, and certainly an injury, and in my case an injury which threatened my mobility. I mean, I wasn't able to walk for 3 months. I had broken both of my wrists. So, you know, take every single daily task that you have and try to picture it with, okay, I can lift a Coke can with my hands. Like that was my weight limitation. And I had to do that for like 8 to 10 weeks. And so, you know, cooking, then showering, you know, getting up and down stairs. How am I going to do that with no wrists? I can't use crutches and, you know, a knee scooter. Grocery shopping, like any of these things. And so not only was my mobility severely compromised, and I had been, you know, I prided myself on being a strong, capable, independent person, but now I felt exposed. I felt, you know, had to ask for help for, you know, not only did I have to have someone cook for me, but like I had to like jerry rig some fork contraption to like, you know, shove food into my mouth. Like it was, you know, I needed to be babysat at, you know, like, you know, a 28-year-old woman. It was quite humbling, and I was angry about it. And then something that I truly loved, and that I felt that I had, you know, found what I was made to do, you know, moving and trail running and being outside in the mountains. I felt like it brought out the best version of myself, not only for the running aspect, but for, you know, being a better teacher, being a better like friend, and you know, every other aspect of my life. And so to have that taken away, I just felt dull. I felt numb. I felt that, you know, I was alive, but I didn't know why. And I didn't see the point. And for me, what really helped is honesty. I couldn't pretend that I wasn't feeling that. And I couldn't show up to the world to you know, people that even, you know, that I loved, like for instance my mother, my coach Matt, that I couldn't put on a happy face for them, because it just felt like a lie. And for me, it was super important to be honest, to be able to tell that to them, how I was feeling. And then it allowed creating space for those negative emotions. Actually, it helped me to move through them instead of like having it, you know, stay like kind of like tucked away in myself and, you know, become something bigger, like this giant storm. I would able to, you know, let it out, and then it could kind of like float away, and then I could, you know, move through it, and then, you know, see the rainbow or the light on the other side. So that was one thing that was really important to me, and like important for my process. And then of course, writing was huge, but just that was again related to community, finding those people that I could be honest with. But it first started with honesty with myself, like what I was really feeling. And since then, it's something that I continue to pay attention to. I mean, I'm open about it. I see a sports psychologist, because I think it's incredibly healthy. Because, you know, like recovery isn't linear, and, you know, certainly an athlete's career, you know, is not linear. And so, you know, injuries, it's not like a one and done type of situation, like they happen again. And so it's practicing those tools of, self-care. You guys see these little like twinkle lights behind me? I have like a little, like, this is my like safe corner. I drink tea here and I can like,
love it.
yeah, like listen to music, like kind of have some like time for myself. Yeah. So stuff like that. But I think it all starts with honesty and yeah, allowing myself to be angry, to be sad. And then, yeah, because I feel like I love sunrises, right? I love to get up in the morning and see the sunrise, to be outside when the day's waking up. But you can't have a sunrise unless you have a sunset and unless you have the nighttime. So you have to accept those dark moments. It's obviously a euphemism.
Right.
Before, to get to the good stuff. And if I hadn't experienced the lows, I can't appreciate the highs and I can't appreciate where I've been or where I've come from. And I did mention this in the book, but one thing that got me through on these really tough days is I pictured myself building a house. And I grew up in a house that was kind of like, it was a nice little ranch style house, like single level, but it had like little bricks. So it was like a brick house. And so I took every day of my recovery as a brick, like the symbolism of a brick. Right. And so even if it wasn't perfect, like if there's like little chips in the brick, like the surface wasn't perfect, like if you look closely at a brick house, there's kind of like, they're imperfect, but it didn't matter. And so if every day wasn't perfect, it's okay. It represented a brick and I'd lay it down in the foundation. And I couldn't see what house I was building, but I knew I was building a strong foundation and I would never miss a day. And so there wasn't going to be a hole. There might just be a chipped and ugly brick in there, but it was in there. And it was like building this beautiful house one day that I'd get to, like enjoy and live in. And I'm still building it, but that's kind of what I pictured.
I love that. And I also, I loved how, when you mentioned this a little bit before, when you had that ankle break, it was like 18 or 19 months after everything happened. It was so amazing to have you, to hear you describe what that process looked like compared to what you had just gone through. And I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that, about how you were able to kind of use these tools in the toolbox, that you kind of acquired. You like that right there? So
yeah, I love that. Actually, I use that euphemism too. It's like, I'm just have another tool in my toolbox.
Yeah, put it in the toolbox.
I've got a pretty big belt right now for all my tools. But yeah, I remember the day. I mean, I was finally feeling ready. I was finally feeling like excited to do a race calendar. And like, I was ready to do my longest race that I've ever done, like TDS. So Tour de Duc de Savoie, that race that's kind of in the UTMB series. And they had just changed it in 2019 to be even longer. So instead of 125K, it was going to be 145K. So like 90 miles. And that's the longest I'd ever run. I was like, yes, I can do it. Let's do this. I'm all for like, running my longest distance after my accident. I was like, why not? I'm going to do it.
Right.
And I remember I was just getting into training. It was the end of January. It was still kind of snowy, but like I was doing, lower trails and kind of some speed work. And we had this big snowstorm. And so I, went out to run in the snow because it's one of my favorite things to do. And, as I got off the trail and I was finishing the trail run, I was 4 blocks from my house and I slipped on some, packed ice underneath the snow. And I immediately knew I had broken my ankle.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I remember just sobbing on the sidewalk and saying, I called my PT. He was like, I think I called my doctor first and then my PT second and then an Uber. But like, I remember I was just crying and I was like, I don't know if I could do this again. Like, I don't know if I could do this again. And, everyone was like, but you've been through worse. And I'm like, but I know what's coming. I know what I'm about to do. I'm about to like go to war again. And, I honestly, I kind of hit a new rock bottom. It's like some things that I kind of hadn't, I guess, completely dealt with since the accident. I had more time to deal with it now and like have that hope. And then, it being, taken away from me and, you know, have to go into this again. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but
yes, no, that was great. And you talked about how, you know, it took, I think it was like a week or two of that intense grief.
Yes.
Compared to before where it was, you know, much longer extended time.
Yeah, and that was actually, that was a really good point because I think during the accident, I had this kind of loss of identity and loss of sense of self for months. Like it was on the order of probably six months that I just didn't trust my body. I didn't know like what I was doing. I didn't know if I, you know, even wanted to compete again, like what I was, you know, I just felt this loss of sense of self, and I felt depressed and, you know, fighting every day to kind of find some sort of hope to keep going. And that was really a desperate time because it was, it just lasted for so long. And I think I finally let go of it when I realized I was chasing this old version of myself. And in letting go of that, I think I was able to move forward and, you know, kind of let go of this sadness. But so, I mean, again, the injury. So when I broke my ankle, it was devastating. But instead of spending, you know, a month or two just lamenting and, you know, being angry and sad, you know, I let myself be pissed. I let myself be sad. I let myself cry myself to sleep for, you know, maybe a week, 2 weeks. And then I, you know, was ready to fight again. Yeah. And this is not the best news, but I have a broken foot at the moment. And so it's really, it's bittersweet. And so it's like, so, you know, I want to be celebrating this book and I'm very happy, but then there's this sadness to it. And actually I go in for surgery tomorrow, and, you know, those that are closest to me, they've seen this, they've seen the tears, they've seen the anger, you know, but I need to let that out and I need to experience those things because I know that like once it happens, it's game time and I'm a closer. And so let's do this.
Yes.
Even though I'm angry and I hate it, like I wrote a kind of something about this, like resilience is not linear, and you know, it's something that we're always going to be dealing with as athletes, and especially as an elite athlete, you're training on that line, and it's something that you love to do, and sometimes things just happen, and you know, when it rains it pours, but there's always something to learn, and it's okay if I don't know what that is yet, but you know, I will learn something. I promise you that.
I love that. You know, I think my favorite chapter is hard to choose, but I'm gonna read the title so I don't get it wrong. You can achieve it, but not attain it. We gotta talk about that. One of my favorites too. It was just like, it seemed like that was kind of what you experienced as well. When I was reading, I thought like, wow, she's like, it seems like you really turned a corner almost, you know, mentally and physically in that. So please share about that to our listeners. I think I'll say that was probably my favorite chapter of the book.
Yeah, so you can achieve it, not attain it. So this is how I think about it. So I think, you know, you can like switch it around either way, but you can achieve it, not attain it. And so for me, the attainment of something is like holding on to something. Like for instance, a trophy, like it's physical, it's tangible. You want to like, you know, roll it up and sleep with it at night. And I think a lot of athletes, I certainly was guilty of this, where I was chasing, you know, the race results, the wins. And of course that feels so good, but like a trophy, holding on to that, like attaining of this thing, you can't, it's actually impossible. And this is one of my favorite kind of breakthrough moments, and I've taken it with me ever since, is that I'm actually in love with the process. And that's kind of the achievement itself. I'm in love with the work, the day in, the day out, the ugly, the, you know, just so runs. And then, you know, the wonderful runs where you feel like you can go for forever. The process of just staying healthy and going to being on the start line, because that's to me, this whole process of achievement. And, yeah, it's just letting go of this idea of like holding on to this feeling, because as soon as you cross the finish line, it's done. It's over. And all you have are the memories to hold on to, and this like beautiful process that got you there. And if, I'm in love with that, the achievement of these goals, and the process of it, and letting go of this attainment, it doesn't matter. It's like, I think this is this epiphany where I realized it's like, I didn't need to race again. I didn't need to be an elite runner again, but I just loved running so much for what it brought me, how much better of a person it made me. And just that process of chasing after something that you love, just for no other reason that you love it and it brings you something.
Yeah.
And that to me is, why I chose to work so hard, and why I had the opportunity to fall in love with running again, and fall in love with this whole process. And I have trophies. I was showing you my favorite like cowbell trophy, like in my little like nice corner. But the reason why I love it is not because of the trophy or what it represents, like what the actual thing is. I can't, like, it doesn't, but it's the memories that it represents, and it's this whole process of like the build up to that particular moment. And yeah,
Well, it's pretty awesome that trophy is a cowbell. I mean, that is pretty great too.
Yeah, I know, like, and it was in the Pyrenees, like that's like you hear these sounds of the cowbell.
Yeah.
Like, oh, so it's again, it's like, it brings me back to those moments, not of like the actual results. Like I can't hold on to that, but it brings you back to these like really beautiful memories of, running through the fields in the Pyrenees and saying hi to these cows.
Yes. I love that. I loved how you spent a good chunk of time in the book talking about your why, and I know you were just referencing that. And I think it's important, for all of us to kind of think through, for something that we invest a lot of time in. Why are you running? why are you doing this? I know you probably, sometimes we ask ourselves that question when it's like really a terrible situation, why am I doing this? But I love that you dug deeper into that, in your book.
Yeah. And so I think everyone's why is different, because I've certainly had those moments like many times, especially like on a bad training run or like a run, it just doesn't feel good. I'm like, why am I putting myself through this? Or like a race, like a super long race, or I'm just like, your stomach goes sour and you're like, what the heck? Like, what? Yeah. This is madness. Like, why am I doing this to myself? But yeah, for me, it's just, it represents this bigger process. It's like curiosity has always been something that I would describe myself as such a curious person. And my curiosity in the first, my, like in school, I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to be an entomologist. I wanted to, study science and be a professor like my dad was. And, I was just so curious. I think I was so annoying as a child because I was always asked like why, and like I'd never, let something go. I always wanted to know why. And so I was chasing that curiosity, and that's what got me into running. And it's just like pushing those limits, at a physical part instead of a mental part. And I think it's beautiful because it's like yin and yang. It's like it balances, but it creates this whole beautiful, bigger picture. And it's in constant flow and equilibrium, and one feeds the other, and kind of, you don't know where one ends and one begins. And that's why I like running. And I say just movement too. I feel like I'm an endurance athlete. I mean, I discovered gravel cycling through all this too. And it's just, movement. And it's just that whole bigger process. Like I'm in love with what that brings me, and how it forces me to be a more curious person, a better person, a more honest person, and to constantly learn. And I think that's the biggest lesson, is that, there's always, it's kind of like this little mantra. Another one of my favorite chapters is believe. And it's one of these mantras that I told myself, is that believe that your best athletic days are ahead of you. It doesn't have to be athletic, but believe that your best days are ahead of you. But that to me represents that there's always something to learn. No matter where you are in life, no matter what age, no matter recovery, injury, anything, there's always something to learn, and there's always something to strive for and to have goals. And I mean, running is at the core of that. And that's my why.
Yeah. I loved, I can't remember if it was your coach Adam or Matt, who was the conversation you had described. They were chatting with you. It was a low moment you were having, and they basically said, like, you know, you're right. You know, you're not the same person that you were. In fact, you're becoming a better person of yourself. I thought that was such a powerful moment, you know, to experience that.
Yeah. And oh my gosh, it's actually kind of funny. It's like, I hate the word comeback because
Yeah.
it implies like that I'm coming back to the same person, and I'm not. And none of us are. Like, all of our experiences, good or bad, they shape us into who we are. And that's just a reality. And I don't think change is bad. It's progression. It's progress. It's, you know, learning. And so, yeah, that's kind of what, once I let go of that, I didn't want to come back to this, because I think as athletes, like, we're attached to times, and, you know, if I'm not improving all the time, if I didn't set a PR, but it's like, you know, every trail I run, if it's like the same trail, my favorite trail, if I run it every day during a week, it's different every single time.
Right.
And so how can I expect that of myself? And in fact, if I wanted to be the same person, then I'd be boring, and I don't want that. But also, another quick thing. It's my favorite quote by an LL Cool J lyric. And
okay, let's have it. What do we got?
Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years.
Mic drop. Mic drop. Where's my mic?
Well, yeah, I could say it like he did, or like rap it like he does, but I don't know. Everyone, I always think about that. I was like, yeah, what would LL Cool J say to that?
Oh man, I should have put that on your sign rather than the other quote.
No, that one's a good one. I like the belief.
That's awesome. Speaking of another humorous moment in the book, when you I think it was one of your doctors said, you know, you can start jogging.
Yeah.
And you said, it's funny because that's like a reoccurring joke in our community about jogging. So I really appreciate
Jay.
jogging. That was great. Well, I want to keep us moving. I'm going to ask you one more question. Then we do have some questions in the chat, which I'm going to read to you. So my last question was kind of just, maybe we could sum up like the last chapter. I know it's a lot of spoiler alerts, but you alluded to it, that you went back to the site, and that account in the chapter was it was very moving. Was that difficult for you? I mean, obviously in the moment it was difficult, but was it again more difficult to just, you're writing it out now, you're explaining it all? Like, how was that whole process?
Yeah. So honestly, it was necessary. I knew that I needed to go back to Tromsø. I knew I needed to go back and do that race, but I didn't know when. I thought maybe, you know, it'd be when I was, you know, like an old woman, maybe. I'd have the courage, because it's just never a comfortable place to go back there. But something shifted. It was in 2019, after I came back from the ankle break, and I won that race in Italy again, and I crossed the finish line. I'm like, all right, Hill, you're staying in Europe and you're training for TDS, and you're going back to TDS. Sorry, you're going back to Tromsø. And I'm like, all right. I called Manu, the guy who was kind of there, the first on the scene, rescuing me. And I was like, Manu, if I come and do this race, will you do it with me? And he said yes. And then from there, I was like, okay, I booked a plane ticket, and I was like, I'm doing this. I'm not backing out. And I invited my mom to come. But honestly, I mean, I remember I wanted to go to the place where I'd fallen with Manu before I did the race.
Yeah.
And it was important for me to do the race, because I wanted to see it. I wanted to do it, and I wanted to do it for me, but I also wanted to do it for the community in Tromsø, because you know, they're the same people there that were volunteering on the race course when I had fallen. And you know, as to speaking to the writing process, it was eerie, it was awful, it was traumatic, going back there, but being able to write about the experience and create new memories in this, you know, deep, this dark place that kind of had like my biggest fears and, you know, awful memories, to go back there and to create such wonderful experiences with people that saved my life, and, you know, also with my mother, and to do that race again, it was one of the most powerful experiences, and healing also. And yeah, it was there was a lot of tears that were shed. There was a lot of like raw moments. I think one of the probably harder than going back to the place that nearly killed you. Something that's even harder than that is doing a race, an ultra race with another person, and that person is the one who saved you on this mountainside. So there was a lot of emotion. But I was incredibly grateful.
And probably for him too, as well, right?
Absolutely. He actually, and so we had been friends and we had talked, but I had not been back there in 2 years. And so I got to hear firsthand, his recount of the story from his perspective. Because we had never done it before. I'd never really heard from him, how bad that it actually was. And so, yeah, gaining insight into those experiences was, I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful for it. And I'm grateful that I stepped into that, even though, so this is something like courage to me is knowing that I'm scared and saying, okay, I see you. I'm scared. The fear, you're very scary, and I'm going to do it anyways. Like that to me is courage. And yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you shared how so many people, both in that race, but also a previous race you had done, had said, you're so brave. That was like a reoccurring thing. That must have been so, how did you feel when people were telling you that?
I probably was crying when they told me I'm brave. And I'm like, I don't see what you see. Like, I'm like a mess right now. But again, it's like hearing that kind of also just gives me, encourages me to kind of keep showing up and doing what I'm doing. And, then yeah, maybe I am brave. And, I mean, although it wouldn't be an adjective that I would describe myself as, maybe I am. And but it's just, having the support of those people. And if they see it in you, then you can kind of like believe it in yourself too.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, you definitely are,
Thanks.
So.
Yeah, some Italian man like grabbing my face during a race after I was crying, like, you are so brave. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm gonna keep going.
I love that. Okay, I'm gonna ask you a couple questions that are in the chat, and then before we end, I'm gonna hit you with some rapid fire fun questions.
Oh yeah, sweet, hit me.
We'll save that for the end because we're in a good flow here. So here's let me scroll up and get our first question. Well, first let me read you this comment. This is from Steve Banfield. Good friend Steve. He says, thank you, Hilary. Watching you get through your injury helped me during my recovery from an injury, which inspired others to do what I was doing. So that's from Steve Banfield. And another woman in our group, Judy Heller, says, thank you for sharing this true strength. I look forward to reading your book. I know she is going through an injury right now, so I'm sure she will. I
think it'll help. Yeah,
definitely. Judy, get that book. You can borrow mine if you need it. I'll bring it down Saturday. Okay, here's our first question. This is from Becca, one of my right-hand women who helps with Sassquad. She says, Mama Beck, the PT here. She's a physical therapist. You can only imagine what rehab was like. What was your least favorite exercise that your PT made you do? Also, have you trained during rehab on the Ultra G treadmill? I highly recommend if you have not.
See, that's actually some interesting tidbit. I have not trained on the Ultra G during both of my recoveries, so maybe I'll do it during this one. So yeah, okay, I should do that. My least favorite was BFR, blood flow restriction. Because I mean, it's a great way to promote, like, without impact to promote healing, but man, it's uncomfortable. It's like, it's basically like a tourniquet around your like affected limb. So you just like restrict the blood flow and your limb turns purple as you do some like body weight exercises. It does not feel good, but it's effective.
All right, there you go, Mama Beck. There's your answer there. This is from Ryan Thorpe. He's a big ultra runner here on the East Coast. Any interest in running some Beast Coast races? I think you'd love Manitou's Revenge 54 miler, all the rocks, roots, and muds you could ever want, plus pizza and burritos at the finish. And I have to say, I'm friends with the RD Charlie, and I can totally attest to truth for that. You would love Manitou's, but
Oh
Have you
man,
ever gone to
absolutely.
Coast?
So Beast Coast. So I mean, Zach Miller is a teammate of mine, and he's always like representing the Beast Coast. So absolutely, I think like some of the trails out east are underrated. Like everyone is like, oh yeah, like like in Colorado, oh the big mountains here, but man, there's like way more technical trails on the East Coast. So it's like if you want to practice for the Alps and things like that, like that's the place to be. So absolutely, I do. They're
Awesome.
probably gonna eat me alive.
There are just so many aggressive rocks. That's what I say. They're just very aggressive. They
Yeah.
just they don't care. And it reminds me, one of my other favorite parts of the book was this. It was like 2 pages where you talked about uh, the mountains and the way you described the mountains. I love that. I want to like print it up. But, so you got to read the book in that section. But respect. You
Yeah,
respect the mountains and
exactly. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, so I mean, so hopefully if in-person events happen, if anyone wants to, invite me to some events in the East Coast, I'll come out there, make a tour of
hey, Sasquad trail running all the way. We'll hook you up.
it.
All right, here's another question. This is from Kaylin Hopkins. I see that you run and ride. Do you ride as an alternative for cross training and or have you entered bike races? Have you developed a love for running? Also regarding your running, do you avoid the trickier and tougher trails? Assuming, because of your history with the injury. So there are a couple questions in there.
Yeah, so for riding and running, I think it's a great way to balance training. I mean, I love riding my bike. And it's, if I kind of periodize it throughout the year. And so if I'm training for a big run, then of course I'll run more, but I'll use cycling also kind of as a means for recovery, but also adding in kind of more volume without the pounding. I have done some bike races. This is actually, I wrote about it, but I didn't make it into the book. So, have more material. But my first ever bike race was actually after I broke my ankle. I only had 2 months of training outside riding my bike on a gravel bike, and I did the Dirty Kansas 200. So it's a 200-mile bike race in Kansas on super gnarly, unmaintained gravel roads. It's now called Unbound Gravel. So that was my, introduction to gravel bike racing, and I loved it. So I'm gonna do more gravel bike races as well. And for running, no, I don't actually. Those are the type of races that I like to do. So it's the terrain that I like to train on. And I feel like it's a kind of teaching myself to get back to those types of trails. And in Colorado, we still have some technical trails, and I prefer to run those as opposed to like the buttery single track. I always prefer a good like power hike grind on a steep rocky trail, and bouncing down it on the rocks than a track meet on buttery trail.
Right. All right, there you go, Caitlin. That was a good question. We've got another one here. This is from Marie Bertilson. I probably killed her last name. I'm sorry, Marie. She says, you are such an inspiration. I wonder how you deal with pain. How do you differ between, quote, this is pain, but I can power through, and this is a bad pain that makes things worse, and I should take a step back or take a different route? That's a really good question. So how do you decipher between different types of pain?
Yeah, so this is actually something I kind of go into the book, and probably applicable to right now because I broke my foot, and I do have a really high pain tolerance, and so it was kind of like undiagnosed for a couple weeks because I thought it was maybe tendonitis as opposed to an actual break. So it's a little bone in the foot, so maybe that's why it didn't feel so bad. But something that basically that doesn't improve. So it's like you listen to the other cues of your body. Like if it doesn't respond, if it gets worse after exercise and with swelling, redness, irritation, I always check things out sooner rather than later. And I'm always a big proponent of strength training and recovery. And so usually you can keep things in check that way. But there is still some pain that I had to work through, especially with the ligament and returning back to running. And it's a fine line. But again, it's realizing, okay, does it kind of loosen up after I start to run? And does it get worse? If you basically did too much. And so it's kind of finding that balance. It's for each person. It's definitely not linear. I wish I had a thing to like a formula to tell you, but it's like, you can it's listening to the cues of your body and, knowing that if this pain is persistent and it doesn't get better, either with rest or, kind of this like progression of like gradual return to exercise, then that's something you should pay attention to. But always have those people that you can kind of bounce these ideas off of and, explain. I'm a running coach. And so, all of these, when athletes have something that come up, I'm like, okay, this sounds like this, like, let's get this checked out. But yeah, it's definitely a hard process to go by. But also one thing I recommend is, I'm not a fan of painkillers. I'm a fan of, like listening to your body and not masking the pain. And so really listening to being honest with, and like listening to those cues your body is telling you, because it's important.
Right. That's in line with the Coop cast. I remember he's like, if I find any bottles of painkillers, I throw them out. If I find them in my athlete's bag, I throw them out.
No.
I'm with you on that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, a couple more comments in here. Sean Tracy says, huge respect working back into it after an injury, shows true grit. Next comment. This is from Michelle Rice. She's another member of our Dream Team Extreme. You know Michelle, right?
Yeah.
You guys have met. Yeah. So she said, you would crush Grindstone 100 out and back. Should I send you an invite?
Sure.
Yeah. I think dreams go to die at Grindstone. There's something. I'm just kidding. Not real.
Yeah.
Yes, but we would love to have you come on the Beast Coast. Let us know when you're in town.
That'd be awesome. I'd love it.
Okay, we have another question. This is from Ryan Thorpe again. He said, did your fall change the way that you assess risk in the mountains? Any advice on moving safely through high consequence terrain, which I know Ryan does a lot. He's a mountain goat himself.
Yeah, it for sure did. And so, I mean, it definitely was, okay. It's kind of how I describe it. I don't describe myself as a risk taker. I was never that way. I am not that way. But it's, it's a numbers game. Statistically speaking, some things can happen when you go out into the mountains. I had an unlucky day. But I was fairly comfortable with the terrain that I was running on. In Tromsø, it was, third class, fourth class, maybe at times. So in the classes, it's like, so if you're able to run, that's first class, because like 1 foot on the ground. Second class is walking, so like 2 feet. Third class, a hand down. Fourth class, you need like all hands. And so my risk kind of management, I have the skills. I practice these things. So basically, if I feel comfortable and I have these skills, then I feel like the risk is I'm comfortable accepting the risk involved. Doesn't mean that the risk goes any lower. It's still there, but my skills can kind of equip me for, my comfort level going into them. And so, yeah, absolutely, this accident changed that. And it also helped me to listen to this intuition that if I felt that things felt off, like mentally, like if I felt any kind of like twinge of like, I don't know, if like, I'm not feeling this today, change the route. I won't do it. And I think that is like listening to your body, because, it'll tell you these different cues. You have to be, kind of engaged in the terrain. But I mean, always, like for me, it's always telling someone where I'm going. If I'm, going on a risky thing, like if I'm going by myself, like having a spot tracker, or, going with a buddy, and also like being prepared, whether that's, taking wilderness medicine classes, or, having a trail running partner that does that as well. But yeah, I think it was a process for me learning that stuff again. And it's okay that it's, it's scary at times. I come to these, technical cliffs and I'm uncomfortable in that situation, but it's, relearning those skills again to feel more comfortable in those situations.
Awesome. Great answer for you there, Ryan Thorpe. Looks like we have another question. This is from Praveen Kumar. Says, Hilary, how did you manage your eating habits during recovery?
So again, like listening to your body. I worked with a nutritionist, and so it's like kind of having things that help, little supplements or things to help with inflammation and all this other stuff. But also your body needs an immense amount of nutrients when you're healing. And so that is, I know everyone is, afraid of like, oh, what happens if I'm injured and like gaining weight or all of this stuff. But honestly, your body needs so much good food to heal itself properly. And if you don't like actually pay attention to that, it could lead yourself up for kind of risks later on. So I think, there's always that fear, but it's just really trying to listen to your body and, like, rebuild. And I think like injuries are that time, like you have to rebuild. You can't just go all the time. And like, basically, not deprive yourself, but kind of, come up with, if you're asking your body and demanding it a lot all the time, you're going to reach a limit at some point. And
Right.
so, yeah.
Food and sleep is the 1-2
Oh,
punch.
those are like the biggest, like those are the best ways that you can recover. That's your greatest tips, right? Like, and tools right there, sleep and food.
That's it. Put it in the tool.
That's the training drugs. Those are the drugs, food and sleep.
I also want to say I appreciated you sharing in your book about you talked about body image, you talked about your own physique, and I loved how you like acknowledged and pointed out that your muscle and how strong you were as an athlete really, I mean, it protected you as you were falling. I know you talked about that, and I thought it was so awesome. It was just refreshing to hear, an athlete talking about how it's a good thing to be strong and to have muscle. And here's a prime example of why.
Exactly. Yeah. And it should be celebrated. And yeah, there's again, it's having that kind of just that holistic approach and that bigger representation of like, what does strong mean? And it literally was something I think that saved my life.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to pull up the rapid fire questions on my phone. But while I'm doing that, can you share with everybody, just give a plug for how they can get your book, and then also you're a coach as well. So how can people connect with you if they're interested in coaching?
Yeah. Okay. So all the information that you need is on my website. So makes it easy, hilaryallen.com. There's info for coaching and all the links for kind of a page to my book, for ordering information. You can go to your local bookstore because it's out now. And order off Amazon. But yeah, any of that's there. You can follow me on Instagram. It's Hillygoat_climbs. That's me on Twitter also. You can sign up for, so in addition to the book, should definitely pick up the book, but you can also join my run club, and that's all on my website. So you can kind of join my community there, and sign up for the run club and newsletter. So you can kind of keep up to dates on all things that I'm doing. And I would love to hear from you. So you can always contact me there also.
Awesome. How about your podcast?
So all that information is on there as well. And also through Instagram, I always plug kind of the things that I'm doing. So I have a podcast through CTS. So it's called the Train Right Podcast, and that's all linked on my website as well. And I'm also the co-host of the fastest known podcast, so the FKT podcast. So me and Buzz Burrell, we get to talk to some really cool people. So, and I'll always link that stuff to my Instagram as well.
Awesome. Yes, I love both of the podcasts. I just listened to the sleep episode. That was fantastic. It was really great. The FKT podcast is a lot of fun as well.
Yeah.
Being a FKT, that's a trail that you would love if you come to Jersey, New York. We made an FKT route. It's called the Seven Summits Traverse. It's in the Bear Mountain area. So there's 7 summits that you hit. It's about 27 miles long with 7,600 feet of gain, and it's all rocks. There's nothing but rocks. It's just up, down, up, down, up, down. So,
speaking of the Beast Coast and FKTs, like every year you see people like going after the Prezi Traverse and like all like there's some other ones there, but like you always see people like throwing down crazy times.
Nuts, yeah. Okay, all right. You ready for this rapid fire?
I'm ready.
Okay, these are very serious questions.
Got it.
Not really. Okay, first one, most important. Do you believe in Sasquatch?
Yes.
No hesitation.
I've run at night on trails for sure. I believe in him. Maybe he could takes the form of like moose or like skunks. I don't know, like animals.
Well, that's the next question. Have you seen Sasquatch on the trail?
Probably, most likely. I'd ask him if he'd seen me. Most definitely.
Squatchy, he's always out there. You don't know it. All right, next question, also important. What is the greatest 80s movie of all time?
Wait, what? 80s movie? Is Top Gun 80s?
Yes.
That's like my favorite. Also, cue Take My Breath Away. Like, okay.
The theme song. All right, next question. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
No.
No hesitation there either.
It's a hot dog. It's not a sandwich. It's a thing of its own.
It's in its own category. And also its own category of like mystery meat as well, right?
Yeah, true.
All right, next one. You are a coffee junkie. I gathered that from your book. How do you take your coffee?
Black.
Black. Nothing in it.
Yep. Usually, so here's the thing. I like shots in the dark. So either like a nice espresso. I just got turned on to this new thing. It's Turkish coffee. It's amazing. But black coffee. So I have like coffee with like shots of espresso in it.
So you're about the caffeine life, sounds like.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But if I have it in like the afternoon or like mid-morning, I'll put oat milk in it, but black coffee.
Okay. There it is. Black coffee. Next one. If you could instantly be good, really, really good at one sport, what would it be?
Rock climbing.
Love that.
Yeah.
Do you do any rock climbing?
I did a little bit, but it's like the fear aspect, and it's such a beautiful sport. I think that would be awesome. Yeah, rock climbing or like jujitsu, something like that.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, next one. This is a fun one. If you could have any person, living or deceased, be a guest on your podcast, who would it be?
This is the hardest question ever. I have about 5 people.
All right.
Richard Feynman.
Okay. You can name 5 if you have 5.
Okay. All of them are kind of like scientists.
Okay.
So, I mean, like Richard Feynman, I would choose Albert Einstein. That's kind of like
obviously.
Whatever. Ernest Rutherford. He was like he discovered like the gold atom. Like I'm such a nerd. Oh my God. Watson and Crick. Yeah. Marie Curie. Man, she was a badass. Yeah. I don't know. All of these different things. But also, I mean, I don't know.
Those are great. Those are good answers. All right, next one. FDR. Yeah. Fireside chats, right?
Yeah, dude, he's great. Yeah.
Next one. We have 2 questions left. Where is your favorite place in the world? Where's your happy place?
Oh man.
Is it right there where you are with the mood lighting and cowbell?
I feel like home it's like 3 things. Like home is where, your, like say heart is, but I think home is like, you can find home at peace in yourself. You can find home in an actual physical place, and you can find home in a community. So it's like where you can find those 3 things is like, I think the best. But I think one of my favorite places in the world is the Lost Creek Wilderness here in Colorado.
That sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, last question. This is a fun one. Not if, but when they make a movie about your life, who is going to star as Hilary Allen? You know it's going to happen. I'm calling it right here. You guys heard it.
It's not going to happen.
It is going to happen.
Can we poll the audience? Who would do it? I don't know. I don't keep up with famous people. Like, I don't know. The girl in the Notebook, that woman. She kind of has red hair sometimes. What's that lady's name?
I'm probably the worst person to ask this question.
Amy Adams? No, she was in she in American Hustle? I don't know.
You're in the chat and you can help us out. You can drop
it's like searching for people with like red hair. I don't know. I have no idea.
Anthony Longano says the actress from Queen's Gambit.
Oh, dude, yes, I agree with you, Anthony. Okay, cool.
There you go. All right, good job, Anthony. We got our. Oh, Marie says Rachel McAdams.
Yeah, her, sure.
Okay.
I don't know.
That's awesome. Listen, I'm just saying it would be a phenomenal movie, you know.
Cool.
No.
Cool.
Awesome. Okay, those are all the questions. You survived the fire.
You're great. I liked it. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, Hilary, thank you again so much. This was fantastic. Oh, it's 9:15. I'm sorry we went a little bit over. I wasn't even really looking at the clock. It went very
Time went by super fast.
So awesome. Okay, so you heard it from Hilary, all the ways that you can connect with her. You can get the book. Again, broken record here, but highly recommend it. 2 thumbs up. Out and Back, available on Amazon, local bookstores. If you want to learn more about Sassquad trail running, you can go to our website, sasquadtrailrunning.com. Facebook, we're super active on social media, Sassquad Trail Running. Instagram is Sassquad Trail Runners. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, grievances, just reach out. And until we see you again, keep it squatchy.